I am so glad you're here. Next up in our D&D inspired month, we have another Dimension20 campaign and another very interesting creature to make. I'm big on upcycling things and using thrifted materials, and as a result, I collect a lot of odds and ends, bits and bobs, junk, or at least what other people might consider to be junk I see as potential. And that's my main connection to our next creature, the JunkMother. From Starstruck Odyssey, the JunkMother is this fairly large creature made from discarded parts. They are described as having plumage-like tendrils that are old trash bags, thin metal arms with no skin, made up from different bits of trash, and at the center, a porcelain doll face. Admittedly, terrifying to come across in most circumstances, but the JunkMother quickly becomes a very endearing character who, like me and so many other creators out there, sees the beauty and potential in even the smallest piece of junk.
Hi, jumping in here really quick to say that once again, unfortunately, this campaign is not child friendly. So it's not for kids, not yet, wait till you're older.
So we're gonna make the JunkMother. I wasn't sure at first what form they should take. The nut pugs were a stuffy, of course, because that just made sense. And I could have just made a stationary JunkMother figure, but I couldn't stop picturing a sort of marionette-like puppet. Now, I've tried making marionettes in the past to, I was going to say varying degrees of success, but I wouldn't even say that. I don't think I've shared them here on YouTube, but they are on my Instagram if you want to see what happened there. But I'm thinking if we can at least make their arms move and maybe their head, that'll be enough for me. So we're making a JunkMother puppet. Sort of. I know from the description that Brennan, the DM, gives in the show that I'm gonna need trash bags and metal and a little doll face. All of that for sure, but I think the rest of the junk included on our figure will have to just be dependent. There it is. Where was I? Ah, yes. I know that we'll need those things for sure, but the rest of the junk on the JunkMother figure will just have to be kind of dependent on my own collection of trash. So let's dig around in my stash and see what we have to work with. Following the pattern from our last two videos, I'm trying to dress like characters from the campaign, and day one is Riva. Now for the junk. I have who's-its and what's-its galore, but there are two places that I keep most of my junk, and that's in this bin and a bag I've had since high school with old jewelry making supplies. After rummaging around in there for a few minutes, I grabbed pieces that I thought would work for this project in particular, including some old zippers, keys that open nothing, bent and broken bangles, empty spools of thread, beads, various chains and clips, a retractable tape measure that doesn't retract, a trash bag once used as a drop cloth, so many broken sewing needles, and strands of light that no longer glow. That seemed like a good pile to work from, so I tossed it all into a bin and started making the form. Since we're working with scraps, I decided to make the base of the JunkMother with my foam scraps. I use foam like this to make puppets, and it's so hard for me to throw it away because it's terrible for the environment, so if the pieces are large enough, I keep them in this bag. I figure even if they aren't used for another puppet, they can be used as a stuffing, but luckily small pieces are just what we needed for this project. I decided to aim for a height of about 12 inches and grabbed a piece of wood to hold everything up while I built the shape around it. My plan at first was to hang the puppet from a central point atop its head, so to make a loop I turned to my jewelry scraps, found a twist tie and a bit of wire, made a loop with the twist tie, and secured it to the wood dowel with the wire and some hot glue. Then it was a matter of piecing this foam puzzle together. Gluing foam together for a puppet, I would use contact cement, but this is such a small project that I figured hot glue would work just fine. Finding scraps from the bag that I could glue to each other in a mismatched mosaic of green foam was fun, though the form would need a bit of trimming to get the proper shape, especially around the bottom, where it needed to be able to stand upright on its own. Once I had the general shape figured out, it was time to make those skeletal metal arms. To make the joints, I found a couple of screws and a few broken bangles that I cut to length and looped around the screws. I capped the end of the screw off with a bead and some glue, and after quite a bit of fiddling around, finally got the metal arm joints to bend. I hadn't actually figured out how I wanted to attach them to the form though, so for the moment I simply stuck them in where I wanted the arms to go. Day 2's outfit is inspired by Sundry Sydney, who was actually the original topic of this video until I changed my mind at the very last second. I started by chopping the dowel in half because after all the trimming we did around the bottom, it was now too long and got in the way. To make sure the JunkMother had a stable base, I traced the shape onto a piece of cardboard, cut it out, and glued it all around the bottom of the foam. Next, I wanted to figure out the hands. I definitely wanted to use old sewing machine needles for those long fingers, so I snapped the pointed ends off just to make it a little less dangerous, and made a little wrist joint piece out of some broken earring hooks, which I bent into loops and using super glue and wire attached them to the arm pieces I'd already made. As far as attaching the needles though, I would need a base for them to stick into, so I pulled out the polymer clay. I surprisingly have no existing doll heads I could steal a face from, so while I had the clay out, I sculpted the porcelain face as well. I wanted it to have that slight curve to it, like it used to be on a head before being repurposed. So I tried sculpting it onto the curve of a bottle first, but that wasn't really working, so I switched to the bend of my wrist to hold the shape, which mostly worked. After the face was sculpted, I took some gray clay and stuck the needles onto one side, and nestled the lobster claw hook on the other side to eventually hook onto the wire wrists I made earlier. While those baked for 45 minutes, I turned to the trash bag. The JunkMother, based on the description and the official art, is mostly made of trash bags, so I started cutting the big bag into little rectangles, hot gluing the edges together and tying them closed like I would a normal trash bag. At first I thought I could just fill them with air, but the seal wasn't strong enough to hold the shape, so I cut up some more foam scraps to toss into the tiny bags. Holding the few bags I'd already made up to the form to see how many more it would need, I decided to cover the whole thing with the same plastic to avoid any green foam from peeking through. That's when I remembered I was working with a lot of hot, melty plastic, so I made sure to put on my mask to keep working. After putting a nice thin skin of trash bag onto the form, I continued making the many little baggies that would need to go around it until the timer went off for our clay. Once they were cooled, I secured the needles onto the clay with some super glue and started painting the face. Something had mixed in with the white clay I used while sculpting, so I put a coat of white paint down first, then added all of the facial details using the official art as a reference. As those dried, it was trash time again, so I continued making the tiny bags, cutting out rectangles, gluing the edges together, turning them inside out, stuffing with foam, and tying them closed.
And much like everything else in this project, attached them to the form using hot glue.
Once I had enough bags to go around, I started figuring out the plumage. I made a few stiff feathers by cutting out the strips, laying a line of glue onto each, and rolling them into shape. I really wanted there to be a variation when it came to the tattered plastic plumage, so some of them needed to be able to stand upright while the others flowed freely. To make the more loosely flowing pieces, I cut the rest of the trash bag into strips, cut those strips into a fringe, and glued them down around the upper part of the puppet. This was kind of tricky, and our JunkMother needed some butterfly clips to hold their plumage back while I worked on the rest, but eventually I figured out that I needed to glue the strips on first, then cut the fringe like I was giving them a haircut, which was much easier to work with. Day 3's outfit was inspired by Gunny. The head would be attached with some wire from a strand of broken lights and some hot glue, and after cutting the mark in with some scissors, I continued placing the fringe all around the top. Once the plastic fringe was in place, I put the head together. Using this bendy wire would enable the head to move, almost like a tiny little neck that would be hidden by the rest of the fringe. I tied a bit of black thread around the wire before gluing it into place to be able to pull it around and make it move, and did the same thing on the hands. Next, it was time to add the true junk to our JunkMother, so I gathered some little odds and ends to hang from the front of our creature. Some things just needed to be threaded onto a string or connected to a chain. Others, like these wooden beads, needed some paint to add a pop of color here and there, but still dirtied and weathered to showcase their discarded nature. With just the few things that I had pulled out of my junk bin, we had a good assortment, which I attached with more hot glue and pieces of trash bag to hide the tops of the strands. But I felt they needed something more, so I used beads to build the arms and legs of discarded droids that the JunkMother collected over the years from the theme park under which they live. Droids for whom repairs were more expensive than a replacement, so they were tossed aside. No matter though, they would be appreciated by one. The High Priestrix of the discarded, the JunkMother. think that went really well. There's a fly in here. I think she is pretty darn cool. I think as usual, there are some things that could be improved upon, mainly the way that her arms are controlled. I did my best to make little hinges out of the junk that I had, which was the main challenge of this video, was just using my own junk to make the JunkMother. I think it's okay, but I feel like there could be more expression if I had properly figured out how to hinge the shoulder itself instead of just fixing it to the foam. I think if the shoulder were more hinged, or if there was more movement here, and this piece, this top arm piece, was a bit longer, it would have more motion to it and therefore more emotion. I did affix the thread differently to each arm, mainly because by the time I got to the second arm, I couldn't figure out quite what I had done on the first one, so I just kinda did whatever felt right, and I think this one ended up having more emotion, I think because I didn't tie it as tightly from the finger to the wrist joint as I did on this one, which is pretty tight, and therefore it keeps the hand kind of fixed like that, which reduces again some of the motion and therefore the emotion. I do enjoy how the head moves with just one thread. You could do a lot of different like owl bird-like expressions by turning the head very far to the side. I do think that could be improved upon, though I'm not sure how. I think someday I'll have to figure out how to make ball and socket joints that don't crumble. I've tried that in the past. I tried it with my Matilda puppets and it sort of worked, but I'm gonna have to figure out how to make them. But I think for just figuring things out as I go, it's pretty cool. Again, I like that I used my own junk because in many ways I am the JunkMother. I keep a lot of little scraps and I'm glad I got to use them for this, like making the little robot droid limbs hanging off of the front. It's made out of clothespins, beads, and hot glue. These springs are from old pens. There's just a pen cap here, tiny clothespin, a zipper, some wire from a string of lights that doesn't work anymore. I really like the broken sewing machine needle hands. It kind of reminds me of Edward Scissorhands a little bit. I also enjoy the variation on the plumage. Making all the tiny trash bags out of a giant trash bag was also very fun. Yeah, I don't know. This was just a fun project to work on. And even though the functionality of the puppet could be improved, I do really like it. And if you do too, you can let me know by hitting the like button. And if you want to see what we're doing next and join the channel, hit the subscribe button. We are doing a D&D inspired month. I believe I have 2 videos left after this that I'm very excited to share. And if you want to know when I post, hit the notification bell. YouTube will let you know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!